The chandeliers dripped light like diamonds melting slow over the ballroom, catching every sparkle on every champagne flute, every pearl necklace, every fake smile. The air smelled of money and roses, thick enough to choke on. Soft jazz floated from hidden speakers, just loud enough to keep secrets from traveling too far. And there, weaving between the tables with a silver tray balanced on one hand, was Aisha, 24 years old, skin like warm mahogany. Hair twisted back tight, so no strand would dare disobey the uniform rules. Her feet ached in the cheap black flats they made her buy herself, but her face stayed gentle, practiced, invisible. She moved like someone who had learned long ago that being seen too much could cost you everything. She set a fresh flute in front of a woman dripping in diamonds and received the tiniest nod, nothing more. That was fine. Aisha was used to being air. She turned to clear the next table when she felt it, that cold prickle on the back of her neck. Someone watching, judging. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Mr. Lawson stood there in his perfect tuxedo, arms folded, lips curled into the kind of smirk that had never known struggle. He was the hotel's general manager, white, 40-something, born with a silver spoon so shiny he used it as a mirror. His eyes locked on her like she was a smudge on his perfect evening. Aisha, he called, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. Heads turned, conversations dipped. Come here a moment. She walked over slow, tray still balanced, heart already sinking. She knew that tone. She'd heard it aimed at bellhops, at cooks, at anybody who dared breathe too loud while wearing the wrong color skin. He didn't lower his voice, didn't care who heard. I overheard you in the kitchen earlier, he said, smile sharp as broken glass. Humming, singing under your breath like you're on some stage instead of serving my guests. He let the silence hang, let the laughter bubble up from a few drunk investors nearby. Let me be clear, people don't tip performers pretending to be waitresses. They tip waitresses, understand. The words hit her like a slap across the face with the whole room watching. Heat rushed up her neck. Shame tried to crawl inside her chest, but something older, something fiercer, shoved it back down. Still, her voice came out small. Yes, sir, I'm sorry, sir. Sorry for humming, for daring to feel joy while carrying their dirty plates. He waved her off like she was a fly. Get back to work and keep quiet. She turned away, tray trembling now, just enough that the glasses clinked together. She felt every pair of eyes following her, some pitying, most amused. At table 12, a woman in red whispered loud enough, "That's the singing girl, right? How embarrassing." Her husband chuckled into his whiskey. Aisha kept moving, smile stitched on, shoulders straight, but inside something cracked wide open. She could still taste the song she'd been humming minutes ago, something her grandmother used to sing while scrubbing floors for people who never learned her name. Aisha had been singing it soft, under her breath, to keep from crying when the head chef screamed at her for dropping one spoon. Just a few notes to remind herself she was still human. Now that small comfort had been weaponized, turned into a joke, a warning. She slipped into the service corridor, set the tray down hard enough to rattle, pressed her back against the cool wall, and let one tear fall, just one. She wiped it away fast before anyone saw. She thought of her mama working double shifts at the hospital, thought of her little brother needing braces, thought of the rent due next week. She thought of every time she'd swallowed fire just to keep this job. Then she heard the laughter drifting in from the ballroom, bright and careless, like none of them had ever been small. Her hands stopped shaking. She dried her face, fixed her apron, and walked back out with her chin a fraction higher. The storm in her eyes had settled into something calm, dangerous, determined. Because Mr. Lawson didn't know, none of them knew. That voice he mocked, the one she kept locked up tight because the world had taught her it wasn't safe to let it out, was the same voice that used to make her church leap to its feet on Sundays. The same voice that won her a full scholarship to a music conservatory she couldn't afford to attend because her mama got sick. The same voice that could wrap around a heart and squeeze until it remembered how to feel. She picked up a new tray, heavier this time, crystal water goblets catching the light like tears. The string quartet in the corner finished their polite little waltz and paused to tune. The MC, some local celebrity with too many teeth, stepped to the microphone to announce the next performer, some rich man's daughter who sang like a dying cat, but paid well for the privilege. Aisha stood near the service door and waited. The MC cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately Miss Harrington has taken ill this evening." A ripple of disappointment. Mr. Lawson's face darkened. He hated empty moments in his perfect schedule. The MC smiled too wide. "But fear not, we have a wonderful replacement lined up." Mr. Lawson looked relieved. He scanned the room, probably expecting the backup they kept on payroll, some safe, blonde soprano who knew how to stay in her lane. The MC turned, eyes searching, then pointed straight at Aisha. "Miss Aisha Coleman, everyone, let's give her a warm welcome." The room went dead still. Aisha felt every stare like needles. Mr. Lawson's mouth actually fell open. For the first time all night, he looked small. She set the tray down slow, deliberate, took one step forward, then another. The click of her cheap shoes echoed loud in the silence. Somebody snickered, somebody else whispered, "This should be good." Aisha reached the small stage, climbed the 3 steps like she was climbing a mountain. The microphone stood cold in her hand. She looked out over the sea of white faces, diamonds flashing, judgment heavy. Then she looked straight at Mr. Lawson, held his gaze, let him see the fire he'd tried to snuff out. She didn't say a word, didn't need to. She closed her eyes, took one breath that seemed to pull the whole room inside her chest, and began to sing. Not the safe little pop song they expected, not some cute, upbeat number. She sang the old Negro spiritual her grandmother taught her, the one about going home to a place where nobody turns you away. Her voice came out low at first, trembling like it was scared to be free. Then it grew and grew, rich and raw and aching. It climbed the walls, shook the chandeliers, wrapped around every cold heart in that room. Conversations died, forks froze halfway to mouths, tears welled in eyes that had forgotten they knew how. She sang like she was testifying, like she was praying with sound, like she was daring every person there to remember they were human. When the last note faded, the silence was so thick you could feel it press against your skin. Then one person started clapping, then another. Then the whole room rose to their feet, applause thundering like Judgment Day had come early. Mr. Lawson stood frozen, face pale, hands hanging useless at his sides. Aisha looked at him one last time, eyes shining with something ancient and unbroken, and spoke soft into the microphone so everyone heard. Some voices weren't made to stay quiet. She stepped off the stage, head high, tears on her cheeks, but a smile breaking through like sunrise. And somewhere deep inside every person watching, something shifted forever. Because tonight, Dignity wore a waitress uniform, and it sang. The applause from her song still echoed in Aisha's ears like a dream she wasn't allowed to keep. She floated back to the service station on legs that didn't feel like her own, the roar of the crowd fading behind her, replaced by the clatter of plates and the hiss of the dishwasher. The chandeliers still glittered, but now they looked cold, like they were laughing at her for thinking one moment of beauty could change anything. She slipped through the swinging kitchen doors, and the noise of the ballroom cut off like someone slammed a lid on her heart. Steam slapped her face. The smell of grease and bleach burned her nose. She set her empty tray down hard, metal ringing against metal, and just stood there, staring at nothing. Her hands shook now, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of everything rushing in at once. The song had torn something open inside her, and now all the hurt was spilling out. Jamal glanced up from the mountain of dirty plates he was scraping. His apron was soaked, his forehead shining with sweat, but his eyes went soft when he saw her face. Aisha, girl, you all right? He asked low, like the walls might be listening. She opened her mouth to lie, to say the usual I'm good, but the words stuck. Instead, she just shook her head once, small, like even that cost too much. Jamal dropped his scraper, wiped his hands on a towel and stepped close. I heard what you did out there. Whole kitchen heard. You made 'em cry, Aisha. Grown men crying into their $1,000 steaks. Aisha let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sob. And tomorrow, I'll still be the girl who carries their trash. Jamal started to answer, but the door swung open again and another server rushed in, eyes wide. Lawson's talking loud out there, bragging how he put you in your place before you got on stage, saying you only sang because he let you. Aisha's spine straightened like someone poured ice down her back. She pushed past the server, cracked the door just enough to hear. Mr. Lawson stood in the middle of a circle of tuxedos and gowns, swirling his whiskey, voice booming with that fake modesty rich people wear when they're proud of being cruel. You can't let the help get too comfortable, he said, and the men around him nodded like he was dropping wisdom from heaven. Give 'em an inch. Next thing you know they think they're stars. I had to remind that little waitress tonight exactly where she belongs. Laughter rippled, smooth and ugly. One woman touched Lawson's arm like he was a hero. Aisha felt every chuckle land on her skin like hot oil. She let the door close soft and leaned her forehead against the cool steel. Alone again, smaller than ever. The kitchen kept moving around her, people shouting orders, plates crashing, but she was trapped inside a bubble of silence that kept getting tighter. Then the worst part came. A loud, drunken voice from the ballroom cut through the noise. Waitress, singing waitress, over here. A table of red-faced men waved champagne flutes in the air like they were calling a dog. Aisha's stomach twisted. She grabbed a water pitcher because that was her job, that was all she was allowed to be tonight, and walked out. The leader of the pack was a heavy man with a pink tie and breath that smelled like money and gin. He leaned back in his chair, belly spilling over his belt, grinning like he owned the world. You're the girl who thinks she can sing, right? The table erupted in laughter before she even reached them. Come on, sweetheart, give us a little show, since you want attention so bad. The word attention dripped from his mouth like poison. The others leaned forward, hungry for the kill. And there, standing just behind them, arms folded, was Mr. Lawson, watching, smirking, waiting for her to shrink. Aisha stopped at the edge of their table. The pitcher felt heavy as chains in her hand. Every eye in that section turned, smelling blood. Her throat closed. She could feel the tears trying to climb up, hot and furious, but she locked her jaw and swallowed them down. She would not give them the satisfaction. The drunk man slapped the table. What too good for us now? Sing, girl, go on. The laughter got louder. Someone started clapping slow, mocking. Aisha looked at Mr. Lawson. He raised an eyebrow, daring her to disobey, daring her to obey, didn't matter which, as long as she stayed small. Her voice came out low, steady, cutting through the noise like a blade nobody expected. I'm here to serve you dinner, she said, not to be mocked. For one heartbeat the table went quiet, surprised she spoke back at all. Then the drunk man threw his head back and howled. Oh, she's got attitude now. Look at her, thinks she's Beyoncé in that little apron. The whole table roared. One woman dabbed her eyes like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. Mr. Lawson's smirk stretched wider, victorious. Aisha stood there while the laughter poured over her, thick and suffocating. She felt every drop, felt herself shrinking, until she was the same scared little girl who used to hide under the church pews when the bill collectors came knocking. She turned slow and walked away. The pitcher trembled in her grip, water sloshing against the glass. Behind her, the mocking followed like dogs nipping at her heels. She pushed through the service door, set the pitcher down without spilling a drop, and just breathed. In, out, trying to find the pieces of herself they kept trying to steal. Jamal was there again, watching her with worried eyes. Aisha. She shook her head, didn't trust her voice yet. Because something inside her was shifting, something dangerous, something righteous. The laughter from the ballroom leaked through the walls, bright and careless and cruel, and with every chuckle, the storm in Aisha's chest grew darker, louder. She closed her eyes and heard her grandmother's voice, clear as Sunday morning. Baby, they can laugh all they want, but thunder don't ask permission before it speaks. Aisha opened her eyes. They thought they had broken her tonight, thought they had put her back in her box. But boxes are made to be broken out of. And Aisha's silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was the quiet right before the sky splits open. She wiped her hands on her apron, slow and deliberate, and looked toward the ballroom doors. They wanted a show. Fine. But this time, the song wouldn't be for them. This time, the song would be judgment. And when it came, every mask in that room was going to fall. The ballroom lights dropped low, the way they do when money expects to be entertained. A single spotlight searched the small stage like a prison guard, waiting for the violinist who would never come. Whispers turned to grumbles. Diamond bracelets flashed as arms crossed. The hotel director, a thin man with a face sharp enough to cut glass, marched straight to Mr. Lawson, voice low and deadly. Fix this. Now. My investors flew in from 3 continents for perfection, not dead air. Lawson's collar suddenly looked too tight, sweat beaded under the perfect part in his hair. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out but panic. The string quartet shuffled their sheet music, helpless. The MC stood frozen with his fake smile cracking at the edges. That's when the kitchen door cracked open just enough for Jamal to stick his head through, grease still on his apron, exhaustion in his eyes, but something fierce burning behind it. He didn't wait for permission. Aisha can sing, he said, loud enough for the whole service hall to hear. Real sing. Silence dropped like a curtain. Every face turned. Cooks paused mid-chop. Servers froze with trays in their hands. The director's head snapped toward the sound. Lawson's eyes bulged. Absolutely not, he hissed, stepping forward like he could block the idea with his body. She's staff. She carries plates, she doesn't. The director raised one hand, sharp, final. If the girl can save my evening, she's on that stage in the next 60 seconds. I don't care what she was carrying 5 minutes ago. Lawson opened his mouth to argue, saw the look on the director's face, and something inside him shrank. He turned slow, like he was moving through water, and his eyes found Aisha standing by the dessert cart. She hadn't moved since the mockery, hadn't spoken, had just been breathing, quiet, gathering every broken piece they threw at her and holding it close. Now every light in the room seemed to point at her. Someone pushed a wireless microphone into her shaking hands. The metal was cold, heavy, real. She looked down at it like she didn't recognize what it was. Jamal gave her the smallest nod, eyes shining proud and terrified all at once. Aisha took one step, then another, toward the stage. Her cheap shoes made no sound on the carpet. The ballroom stretched out in front of her, wide and glittering and waiting to laugh again. Guests watched with lazy curiosity at first, sipping their wine, ready for the joke to continue. A few smirked. One man actually rolled his eyes. Lawson stood off to the side, arms folded so tight his knuckles went white, praying she would choke. Aisha climbed the 3 little steps to the stage. The spotlight found her, harsh and blinding. She was still wearing the same black skirt, same white blouse with the tiny stain near the hem no one had ever let her change. Her name tag caught the light, AISHACOLEMAN, Waitress. She looked small under all that gold and crystal, small and breakable. She brought the microphone to her lips, closed her eyes. The room held its breath, half expecting her to whisper some nervous little thank you and run. Then she sang. Not loud at first, soft, almost a prayer, a single note that floated out like a child testing deep water. It was an old song, the kind grandmothers hum over washtubs, the kind that carried slaves through cotton fields, the kind that says I'm still here even when the world tries to erase me. Her voice trembled on the first line, raw from all the tears she'd swallowed tonight. Then something happened. The tremble turned into power. The power turned into fire. The fire rose and rose until it filled every corner of that cold, proud room. Notes climbed the walls, slipped between the chandeliers, wrapped around every throat that had laughed at her. She sang about trouble, about rivers, about a home nobody could take away. She sang every time she'd been called girl instead of ma'am. Every time a tip was held just out of reach. Every time someone looked through her like she was furniture. And the room broke open. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A woman in diamonds pressed both hands to her chest like her heart might leap out. An old man with silver hair let tears roll unchecked down his cheeks. Someone dropped a champagne flute. It shattered on the marble, and nobody even flinched. The sound of her voice was the only thing left alive. Aisha's eyes stayed closed. She wasn't singing to them anymore. She was singing to every ancestor who ever had to bow their head, to her mama scrubbing floors at dawn, to the little girl inside her who once believed the world would hear her one day. She poured every ounce of pain into those notes and turned it into something so beautiful it hurt to hear. When the last note floated up and dissolved into silence, the room didn't move, didn't breathe. Grown men sat frozen with wet eyes. Women clutched each other's hands. The director stood with his mouth actually open. Mr. Lawson wasn't smirking anymore. His arms had fallen to his sides. His face was pale, eyes glassy, like someone had reached inside his chest and pulled out every ugly thing he'd ever thought about people like Aisha and held it up to the light. He looked small, smaller than she had ever felt. Then one person started clapping. Slow, another joined, then another. Soon the sound thundered, louder than any applause that room had ever known. People rose to their feet without thinking, without caring who saw them cry. They clapped until their palms burned. Aisha opened her eyes. She looked out over the sea of faces that had mocked her, ignored her, tried to shrink her, and for the first time all night she smiled. Not the practiced waitress smile, a real one, small, quiet, but unbreakable. The director walked straight to the stage, took the microphone from her hand, and spoke into it with a voice thick from tears. "Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Aisha Coleman." The applause somehow got louder. Lawson couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the floor like it might swallow him whole. Aisha stepped down from the stage, legs steady now, head high. People reached out to touch her sleeve as she passed, whispering thank you, whispering sorry, whispering her name like it was holy. She walked past Lawson without a word. Didn't need to. The truth had already spoken loud enough. Because sometimes one voice, one pure, honest voice, is enough to make an entire room remember its humanity. Sometimes the person you tried to keep small turns out to be the biggest person in the room. And sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It sings. And when it does, even kings have to bow. The applause didn't stop. It rolled and crashed like the ocean finally breaking free after years of being held back by stone. Grown men who had never cried in public stood with wet faces, clapping until their hands turned red. Women pressed manicured fingers to trembling lips, mascara running in tiny black rivers down powdered cheeks. The same mouths that had laughed at the singing waitress only an hour ago now whispered her name like a prayer. Aisha, Aisha, Aisha. The sound filled the ballroom, bounced off crystal, slipped under every closed heart, and pried it open. She stood in the center of the storm, small and steady, the microphone still warm in her hand. She didn't bow, didn't wave, didn't smile for cameras or collectors of moments. She just breathed slow and deep, letting the love pour over her like rain on parched ground. Her eyes shone, but no tears fell now. She had cried enough tonight. These tears belonged to everyone else. The hotel director climbed the 3 little steps first, the ones she had climbed shaking an hour ago. His expensive shoes looked unsure on that stage now. He reached for her hand like he was afraid she might disappear. "Young lady," he said, voice thick, "that was the most extraordinary thing I have ever heard in this building. Ever." He turned to the crowd, still clapping, still crying. "Miss Aisha Coleman, everyone." The roar came again, louder, like they were trying to make up for every cruel word they had ever let slide. Then the room quieted on its own, the way crowds sometimes do when something holy is about to happen. Mr. Lawson walked forward. You could hear his shoes, every step, slow, heavy, like each one cost him something he couldn't name. His face was pale, eyes red, mouth working without sound. The man who had strutted all night now looked like a little boy who had broken something priceless and didn't know how to say sorry. The crowd parted without thinking, making a path straight to the stage. He stopped at the bottom step, couldn't climb them, couldn't look up at first. When he finally did, Aisha was watching him, calm, quiet, waiting, not gloating, not angry, just waiting. "Aisha," he started, and his voice cracked wide open for the whole room to hear. "I was wrong." The words came out rough, like they had to fight their way past years of pride. "I was cruel. I treated you like you were less. I'm so sorry." His head dropped. Shoulders shook once. The ballroom held its breath so completely you could hear the ice melting in abandoned glasses. Aisha looked at him a long moment. The same man who told her people don't tip performers pretending to be waitresses. The same man who stood smiling while drunk guests demanded she entertain them like a wind-up toy. She could have destroyed him with one sharp word, and every soul in that room would have cheered. Instead, she stepped to the edge of the stage, close enough that he had to look up at her. Her voice came soft, steady, strong enough to carry without the microphone. "I hope," she said, gentle as sunrise, "that tonight you learn to see people for who they are, not for what they wear, or what they carry, or how much money they make. We're all just trying to get home to the people we love." She let that sit, let it sink into him, into everyone. Mr. Lawson nodded, small, over and over, like a man receiving a verdict he finally understood he deserved. A single tear slipped down his cheek, surprising him more than anyone. He didn't wipe it away. The director pulled a cream-colored envelope from his jacket, thick, official, the kind that changes lives. "Miss Coleman," he said, loud enough for the whole room, "the hotel would be honored if you would perform for us every weekend. Paid, respected, as the star you are." He handed it over like he was handing her the keys to the kingdom. Aisha took it, looked inside, saw numbers that made her breath catch, enough to help her mama rest, enough for her little brother's braces, enough to breathe. She folded it slow, tucked it into her apron pocket right next to the order pad she'd carried all night. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll pray on it." Then came the part that broke her open in a whole new way. One by one, guests approached. The woman in red who had whispered how embarrassing earlier now stood with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You made me feel my own heart tonight. Thank you." An older man pressed a folded check into Aisha's palm, eyes wet. "For whatever you need, baby girl. You reminded me who I used to be before all this money." Even the drunk in the pink tie stood in line, head hanging, mumbling apology like a child caught stealing. Jamal and the kitchen crew rushed out, aprons still on, hugging her so hard her feet left the floor. Somebody started singing the old church song she had just poured her soul into, and soon the whole staff was swaying, arms around each other, tears and laughter mixing together like family. Aisha looked around at all of it, the lights, the tears, the open hearts, and something quiet settled inside her chest. She wasn't thinking about contracts or money or even revenge. She was thinking about her grandmother's crooked hands folding laundry for strangers who never said thank you. She was thinking about every black woman who ever had to smile while being torn apart. She was thinking how dignity isn't loud, isn't expensive, isn't something you can buy or sell. It's just the decision to keep your soul intact, no matter how hard the world tries to steal it. She slipped away from the crowd for a moment, found a quiet corner by the grand piano no one was playing anymore. She pressed her back to the wall, closed her eyes, and let one silent tear fall, not from pain this time, but from gratitude. Because tonight the room had learned what she had always known. The person you look down on might just be the one God sent to teach you how to stand up straight. Never forget this, y'all. Never look down on somebody because of the job they do. Never measure a soul by the uniform it wears. Respect costs nothing, but when you withhold it, it can cost you everything, your peace, your humanity, sometimes even your sleep. Because every now and then, the quietest person in the room, the one carrying your plates and cleaning up your mess, carries a light inside them bright enough to humble kings, bright enough to remind the whole world what it means to be human. And when that light finally shines, even the hardest heart has to bow. Aisha smiled into the dark corner, wiped her face, and walked back into the arms waiting for her. Dignity looks good on everybody, especially on those who were told they could never wear it.